Welcome back, residents, to another episode of Hotel Earth podcast. My name is Ariana Halvai, and I am joined here today by my lovely co-host Lexi Moorhead. As per usual, us two talking about important stuff, connecting those dots for y'all.
Hopefully.
We're back. We're back, hopefully, ideally. We're back today with another installment of our plastic season. Mm,
Yes,
evil laugh.
an installment that is actually way more needed than I had even anticipated going into the research for this episode. I hope you're ready to learn some shit because I learned some.
I personally cannot wait. I know we learned a lot from the history of plastics episode. Go check that out if you haven't yet already. But we're a little nervous, mostly because the stuff we talk about is super important and it takes a certain level of like whimsy and creativity to bring a subject like this to people
To
in
life
a
also.
so allow us to connect those dots for you if it's the only thing we can do in this episode besides crack a giggle or two.
And I'd like to make two quick acknowledgments just at the top of the episode. Huge kudos, big thank you to Chelsea Roachman. Roachman, I hope I'm saying your last name correctly. She is an assistant professor at the University of Toronto. A lot of the information from today's episode comes not only from one of her articles, but is inspired by what she put into this particular article. It's called The
Okay.
Story of Plastic Pollution from Distant Ocean Gyres to the Global Policy Stage. And I highly recommend giving it a read. Listen to this episode, go read that article, or go read that article and come listen to the episode. One of the two, but you need to do both.
You need to do both. And if you couldn't tell from the title of the article that we will be referencing, we're talking about plastic pollution today.
Specifically, we're going to be highlighting its impact on our ocean. And I have to, this is my second disclaimer. Plastics are so ingrained in our lives, somewhat literally, as Ari will get into more the next episode. It can be difficult to summarize in just one 45-minute clip every way that they impact our environment. So, as always, the resources we use for the episode will be in both the description and they will also be on our website. And if you want to explore this topic further, which my call to action today is to explore this further, you go look at those things. Now, on to the episode.
Let's do a brief recap first. Last episode, we left off with a society in the beginning stages of conflicting interests, the nexus between problem solving and industry, not new territory. We are in the midst of the post-World War II baby boom, the rise of plastics in everyday life, and industries in full swing. There's little to no foresight regarding disposal or long-term impacts of plastic, and the nexus strengthens.
Today, we're discussing how plastics went from innovation to environmental crisis. And Ari left us near the end of the Ronald Reagan era, thank God. And
Thank
whether
God.
we, oh, he rears his ugly head. You know what? The evils may persist, but so does Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, like why low key is his essence still so present and relevant today? I'd love to know. The
Well,
economists are laughing at me. They're like, obviously.
yeah, well, it's because even though presidents may only be presidents in the United States for 4 to 8 years, their impacts usually take decades to undo. Whether we knew it or not at the end of the Ronald Reagan era, I'm just gonna spoil it for you right now. We knew. Unabashedly, unequivocally, without a doubt, without a shadow of a doubt, we knew that we truly were at an inflection point with plastic production, consumption, and notably waste management.
Well, the fossil fuel companies themselves were publishing internal studies like amongst management, amongst people who needed to know this information. These kinds of studies were already happening as early as the 70s. So, as Lexi said, they knew. They knew and decided to carry forward.
And we're going to talk about it. It's not going to be, I will warn you, it's not going to be the bulk of this episode. If you want a really good article on that particular part, it is linked in the show notes and I will call it out when we get to that point. This is also a time of environmental science breakthroughs and technically environmental protests, but as we're going to get into further on, not in the way that you think necessarily. But before we have protests, we typically have problems. That's usually the cadence of things. You realize that there's an issue, and then people are like, oh, wait a second, we really need to do something about this problem before it turns into, I don't know, an even bigger problem. And as we talked about last episode, plastics, as we know and have manufactured, were new advancements in the early 1900s, but it really wasn't until the early 1970s that we began realizing the truly insidious.
Ooh, that took a spooky turn, y'all. Ooh, I just felt a chill. It's like, oh God, some ghost gonna crawl upside down on my ceiling.
Yeah, it's me. Don't turn around. Wow. This is the danger of using words that you like primarily only read
But high key, I would have read that word as insidious too. I knew.
The truly evil nature of plastics. We'll just say that. So in 1972 is when the first scientific findings of marine plastic debris were published in the journal Science. These reports called to attention small plastic particles that were found in a region of the Atlantic Ocean known as the Sargasso Sea. And this sea is not bound by land masses, it's actually bound by currents, four currents. And if you know anything about currents in the ocean, when you have them kind of in like a cyclical
Hmm.
formation, it will form an ocean gyre, which more on
Yep.
those in a moment. After this, what we will call initial discovery, undergraduates in 1986 began counting pieces of small plastic taken from surface trawls that were going across the North Atlantic Ocean. And this led to the first long-term data set on plastic debris. Now, Ari, you've presumably, as we've talked about, also read Silent Spring.
Yes, of course. It was one of my very first introductions into environmental studies, environmental science. It was written in like 1966, I believe, by Rachel
62.
Carson. Oh, 62. Okay. Thank you. Fact check. The main objective of this book was to communicate the consequences of using DDT and what it can do to bird populations, but also what it does to our food and agriculture and what it does to us, how it affects us just health wise. Great read. Highly suggest people check that out. Maybe we'll have to cover that one again for book club. Might have to might have to get in there.
Makes note.
I think that sometimes I feel like it's kind of like one of the classics, but it really a lot of people don't know this book. Yeah. Okay, we'll circle back.
Well, as Ari so aptly put in, as our discussion has kind of revealed, this was Silent Spring was really like the kickoff. It was the technically the inflection point for other kinds of pollution such as pesticides. And remember the year 1962, because both those things are going to be important. So this all is being discovered, quote unquote, 20-ish years after Rachel Carson published Silent Spring. And just to put it, that's like just to put it on the environmental timeline for all of you. And personally, I didn't know a lot about where plastics came from and like how we know that they're so bad until I started doing research for this season in particular. Um,
I'm not even gonna front with you. I'm with you on that boat.
yeah,
I never really understood plastic before.
yep.
We've lived with it. We've cohabitated. We've created a world where we're almost completely Well, I mean, I can't imagine a world without plastic right now. But I do find that point quite like noteworthy, just the fact that a lot of us don't know the source, the industry, what the effects of it on ecology, but also human health. It's something worth talking about for sure.
It is. And from a personal standpoint, I can remember growing up, my parents being really diligent, honestly, and good on them about telling me not to litter. But the conversation was always about trash more generally. It wasn't specifically aimed at plastics or the consequences of plastics. It was more so we would be in the car, you finish, I don't know, whatever you're snacking on, and it was like we keep this in the car. But I do remember a time not so far removed from that where people would just throw their trash out the window when they're driving. So like I make that comparison and I say that to be like my parents are, and our parents, I should say, are from the generation where even just general pollution wasn't seen as like the worst thing in the world. It was definitely frowned upon, but there was still this like social allowance for it. And I think our generation, which is the last 20 years now. So we're 60 years out from Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, and this will help for the people on YouTube, hopefully. So if this is 1960, this is 2020, 60 years. 20 years ago, I think people actually started giving a shit socially about what happens to their trash, but not necessarily their plastics. And it
Okay.
was only 20 years before that that people were even realizing that plastic was a problem. Now, that's 20 years after Rachel Carson, but that's still 60 years after the invention of plastic. So I just am like framing all of this for our listeners and for us to just put into the broader context of like these are relatively new concepts that we're caring about, even in like the post-industrial revolution sense. Like we're just starting to get an idea. It's taken us 120 years to get an idea, to get a grip, to get a freaking grip and start sounding the alarm. Just as Rachel Carson sounded the alarm on pesticide use, it was after Captain Charles Moore discovered the Great Pacific Garbage Patch in 1996 that he published the first account, 1996, the first account of large accumulations of plastic debris in the middle of the North Pacific subtropical gyre. Now,
Wow.
yeah, so crazy, right?
Yeah. Why don't you explain what a gyre is for our listeners?
I'd be more than
Just really
happy
quick,
to.
just so we're super clear.
I would be more than happy to. It's pretty simple. They are basically just a large system of rotating ocean currents.
In the sense of plastics and of pollution in relation to these gyres, they kind of like because of their cyclical nature, they sort of like capture and keep in their little cycle of currents all of that garbage, which can just keep accumulating and accumulating, which is essentially what was noted here in 1996. And now we have garbage patches in every ocean now.
Probably, and by probably I mean definitely. If anyone
Like probably, I mean, I'm 100% certain.
if you've ever owned or been in a whirlpool, like an actual person's backyard pool type deal, sometimes what they'll do is kind of like run around, at least my parents used to do this. They would like run around the outside of the pool to make a whirlpool because it would force the dirt, the leaves, the debris in the pool to come to the center and then they would vacuum. So this,
Oh,
yeah, like this is how it works. You're exactly right. These rotating currents are basically not all of the plastic pollution. Let's be so real, like things sink to the bottom and the
yeah,
Pacific garbage patch is like floating on the top. It's something that you can see. But
yeah,
this idea is like that the currents are pulling in the plastic that is already in the ocean into these spaces. It's not like people are going out and dumping it into these pockets and it's staying,
right,
it's
right. And
collecting it from
it's the Great
across.
Pacific Garbage Patch. pretty sure is bigger than the size of Texas now.
It is. And while that is probably the best visual frame you can have for yourself, the problem is like much worse. If you've ever seen the picture of the glacier where it's like just like this cute little like itty bitty glacier sticking out of the water, but then it has the cross section of it underneath the water and it's like this massive,
Oh, the iceberg problem,
yeah,
the iceberg theory. Yeah.
yeah, it's like this massive, huge thing underneath the water. You just can't see it. That's basically
Excellent.
what this is. Not necessarily in its form, but in its concept. That is what we're dealing. That is what we're dealing with. And according to NOAA, the National
Uh,
and
oh,
Atmospheric Administration, yeah,
National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, I believe.
potato, something like that.
Yeah.
If you look up NOAA, you'll get their website. According to them, there are five major gyres. There's the North and South Pacific subtropical gyres, and the North and South Atlantic subtropical gyres, and lastly, the Indian Ocean subtropical gyre. Now, there's also like smaller ones that are in the mix, but these are the major. You may have heard of these gyres talked about before, not only from maybe if you're friends with Ari and I, but even popular like pop culture has looped in the environmental crisis to their episodes. For example, on How I Met Your Mother, season 6, episode 17, Garbage Island, Marshall sees a documentary about garbage and becomes fixated on saving the environment. Super relatable, am I right?
That was me after reading Silent Spring in high school. It's like,
Like
gotta save it all right now. Oh
quite
wow, a
literally.
lifetime ago.
Yeah, I hope that Don't Look Up also kind of inspired a new generation of people in the
True.
same way that Rachel Carson inspired you so many years ago.
I personally love when movies and series and kind of everyday pop culture kind of media that we consume just in passing, it helps communicate how important this message is, even if it is just like a silly episode where Marshall gets obsessed with saving the environment. After seeing what the Great Pacific Garbage Patch looks like, or after I read Silent Spring in high school and thought I could single-handedly solve this problem.
You can. You totally can. You can stop this
Climate
problem.
optimism.
Got this.
That's what we're about. Hmm.
Well, if you didn't catch that episode or if you've never heard of the Great Garbage Patch, then let us be your introduction. This patch is located in the North Pacific Ocean, and it's a collection made up almost entirely. I did not know this. It's made up almost entirely from microplastics.
Microplastics, not like
Microplastics,
full on water bottles and like pieces of nylon clothing. Okay.
not
Because are
predominantly.
they're probably like degrading over time with the salt water and the sun beating down on them. That's
Wow.
just pleasant.
She is a scientist, folks. She really is a scientist.
And
Yeah,
she's cute.
you are very cute. Yeah, no, you're exactly right. That is exactly what's happening. There are like large pieces of debris in the garbage patch as well, but it is almost entirely microplastics, which is really terrifying. This garbage patch is also kind of like a misnomer because it sounds like we're just talking about this one massive Texas size garbage patch,
Yeah.
but in reality, it's actually two. Um, it's actually two of them.
Okay. That just tickled my funny bone. She goes, it's actually two, and like waits for my reaction. I'm like, yeah, all right.
It's actually two of them, which is maybe more terrifying. I don't know. The
Two
patch is.
really huge, scary
The
patches of
patch is.
microplastics is definitely scarier than one. One is the loneliest number. Sorry, different song. Anyways. Okay, Lex, how big are these patches?
Would it shock you if I said we don't exactly know?
I feel like I read somewhere that the Great Pacific Garbage Patch has actually had actually surpassed the size of the state of Texas, which is really alarming because that is That's a lot of space.
Things are
That's a
really big
lot.
in Texas, including Texas.
Yeah. Put that on a t-shirt.
Have you seen their cows? Massive,
Have you seen their men?
tiny.
Uh,
Just
Also
kidding.
massive.
Just kidding. Just kidding. We don't know. For just to get us back, we don't know. We have an idea. We can satellite image this thing and we can confirm that it is bigger than the state of Texas if you like put the top of it together. But the Nash NOAA, they have a marine and debris program, and that program estimated it would take 67 ships 1 year to clean up less than 1% of the North Pacific Ocean. 1%, 1 year. And I want to just, I know earlier we talked about,
67 ships, are we talking like those? I mean, is there already a sort of system in place for this? Like what kind of infrastructure do we already have, or is this not happening yet?
so no country wants to take claim to these garbage
Sure.
patches
Tragedy of the commons.
yeah, for obvious reasons. They're like, it's not ours, it's a conglomerate of everyone's plastic crap. And not only do we not want to be responsible for cleaning it up, because that would probably bankrupt a country, frankly, because it is so massive. But where do you put it once you take it out of the ocean? And not only that, because they're microplastics, how do you take it out of the ocean without also taking out animal life? Like there's no
Right.
easy way to tackle this problem, and so people primarily aren't. There are some nonprofit and other private entities, and possibly even some public agencies that are taking serious jabs at trying to tackle this problem. But truth be told, the two things that are going to save us truly and stop contributing at least to these ocean problems are cyclical economies. I should just say circular economies because I don't think anyone calls them cyclical. I think I just coined a new phrase. Oops.
I
Circular
I I got I
economies.
got what you were saying.
Thank you. And proper management of plastics. Those are the two things that are going to save us from this problem.
I think it goes one step further as well, and it's just not just management of plastics, but we seriously like yesterday need to stop this ever grow exponentially growing fossil fuel industry. Like seriously, there's just no other way forward. Not that you can just cold turkey stop everything like tomorrow, but we seriously need to be like moving forward on at least cutting out what we can. Like single-use plastics, there is literally like no point. There's literally no purpose.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I know that there's a
This
lot
is
of
just a
discourse.
piece of evidence for that. I mean, look what's happening to our oceans, and we don't even know how to clean it up.
Yeah, it's something that we don't know. It's more so like I don't want to say it's impossible because that feels like not it's not necessarily impossible, but we certainly haven't figured out how. It's a very large, daunting task to try and clean up an entire ocean full of plastic. I wanted to read this quote. I'm not sure if it's from Captain Moore, but it is from a like boat sea captain who has actually traversed the garbage patch. And I thought that this would be good for people who kind of like the visual or firsthand account of these kinds of things. So here we go. So on the way back to our home port in Long Beach, California, we decided to take a shortcut through the gyre, which few seafarers ever cross. Fishermen shun it because the waters lack the nutrients to support an abundant catch. Sailors dodge it because it lacks the wind to propel their sailboats. Yet as I gazed back from the deck at the surface of what ought to be pristine ocean, I was confronted as far as the eye could see with the sight of plastic. It seemed unbelievable, but I never found a clear spot. In the week it took to cross the subtropical high, no matter what time of day I looked, plastic debris was floating everywhere. Bottles, bottle caps, wrappers, fragments. Months later, after I discussed what I had seen with the oceanographer Curtis Ebsmeyer, perhaps the world's leading expert on flotsam, he began referring to the area as the Eastern Garbage Patch. I know it makes me sad to read these kinds of accounts, like how much of it we just aren't seeing and aren't aware of.
Or
Yeah,
the kind of delegation of responsibility as well. Um,
yeah, yeah.
wow.
The real lack of delegation, which I can't. There's like no one to necessarily point a finger at because to point a finger is to say that there is one person in charge of taking care of this, but it's not. Like this is a collective responsibility, and it genuinely, like you
Right.
just said, it starts with us. So why aren't plastics biodegradable? Like they're made from petroleum. Arguably, that is a naturally occurring substance. Like why do they not
I
biodegrade?
I am so glad you are posing this question because I even often find myself, I'm like, how did it get to this point of refinement that it actually no longer it like can decompose, degrade, whatever naturally anymore? I mean, we fossil fuels come from millions of years old plants and animals. Sure, it goes through this whole refinement and manufacturing process to become plastic, but like why? What about it makes it so toxic to the planet and to us now?
The discussions that I saw mostly credit it to the fact that through the refinement and the manufacturing process, we've made it incredibly difficult to break down. It takes very high heat, and not only that, but the problem with plastics is that there's like so many different types. Like if you pick up your phone and you pick up your headphones, they're not necessarily, they both have plastic in them, but they're not made out of the same kinds of plastic. Like the
Hmm.
components themselves differ from item to item, which also makes
Sure.
from like us breaking them down standpoint makes it very challenging. And in the
Hmm.
environment, historically, to give us a little ray of sunshine, historically, there weren't bacteria or fungi or other kinds of microorganisms capable of breaking down plastics to convert that energy in the plastic, because there is energy there. There wasn't something that could do it. But as time has gone on, and not to completely jump ahead, but life has found a way to start biodegrading some of this stuff. So while they don't biodegrade, meaning they cannot typically on a broad scale be decomposed by bacteria or other living organisms, they do degrade. Now, Lexi, doesn't degrade literally mean something can be broken down, blah, 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 blah. Yes, I'm getting there. Okay.
Let her tell you the story.
Let me speak. Let me speak on it. So, plastic's chemical structure is resistant to natural decomposition processes, like pretty much all of them. And this
And that
inability,
that
go
chemical,
ahead.
sorry, just a quick question. That chemical structure, which we
Mhm.
sort of discussed in the history of plastics episode, was, I mean, we manufactured this durable structure, right?
Yes.
This was not the polymer, the way it exists in nature has been completely refined and reprocessed to be this incredibly like resistant material.
Yes, because plastic has taken on a new meaning based on how we produce and consume it. But plastic really before the invention of it in the 1900s was a much broader term for polymers that could even be found in horn and
Yeah,
like
I mean, it
turtle
was a naturally
shell.
occurring polymer that
Yeah,
just repeated the same chain. That's what
exactly.
plastic technically means. Plastic, as we know
Exactly.
it, is something completely different,
Exactly.
but
So it's worth
ideally is the same.
yeah. And it's worth saying like we really liked the naturally occurring plastics, the shell, the horn, the bone, because I don't actually think bone was technically one of them, but the horn and the shell we liked.
Ivory, like tusk.
Ivory. Yeah. We liked those because they were durable, but they were also malleable and they were naturally occurring. But as we talked about last episode, we almost like extincted animals over their
Extincted.
plastics, over their
That might be a
plastics.
new verb.
We almost extincted
We
them.
extincted them all.
We've extincted a lot of different species. Some of them we didn't even
Yeah.
discover before we extincted them. But
But Lexi's right. Go
anyways,
check out the History of Plastics episode for more on how we nearly sent elephants and tortoise to extinction for billiards. Enter plastics. But anyway, carry on.
but we like did this on purpose. We wanted something that was durable, but I don't think like Francis and I had the biggest conversation on this last night. Humans just we lack foresight. We lack this ability to stop and be like, okay, before we kick off with this thing, like what are the repercussions? And some of it you can't possibly know, but other things you can. Anyways, this inability to naturally decompose back into the environment means that when it chemically breaks down, it simply gets smaller. It does not go away. Repeat after me. Plastic does not go away. Plastic does not go away. Plastic does not go away.
This this enters the concept of microplastics. Here we are. We've found ourselves with a familiar foe.
Foe that, again, I think we are still just on the brink of discovering. Like, we still do
Ooh,
not know.
ominous.
We do not know so much about the impacts of microplastics on not only the environment and not only our health, but also on like the freaking food chain, which I'm getting to. But how this occurs in the ocean, Ari has already previewed for us. It's that the sun breaks down the plastics into tinier and tinier and tinier pieces by photodegradation.
Which I'll be talking all about this in the next episode, but as a little preview, microplastics in the ocean are especially harmful. Marine debris like microplastics disturb marine food webs in the North Pacific subtropical gyre. And the patches can disrupt algae and plankton, which are the most common producers in the marine food web. When you destabilize the base of the food web, the entire food web not only may, but will change. It's inevitable. You can't even remove the smallest little piece of that because the whole thing comes crumbling. It's like a chain reaction. Animals that feed on algae and plankton, like fish and turtles, will have less food. Simple. You want to see people without food? See some crazy shit. Then there are less fish and less turtles. So there is less food for apex predators like tuna, sharks, whales, etc. Eventually, seafood becomes less available and more expensive for us, for people.
Exactly. And not to throw more gas on this inferno, but plastics also leach out and absorb. They do both. Harmful pollutants. They leach them out and they take them in. So on one end, you have the plastics breaking down through photodegradation and leaching out the chemicals. And these chemicals, like Rachel Carson pointed out, not necessarily for plastics, but just chemicals in general, they have
Mhm.
been linked to environmental and health problems. Then on the other hand, plastics can absorb pollutants. So, as we just talked about, if the plastics are absorbing pollutants and these chemicals are now entering the food chain and they're being consumed by not only the marine life, but people, it means that they are literally in our bodies.
Well, and I'm sure we'll elaborate on this in another episode when we relate the plastics issue to human health, but bioaccumulation is fundamental element to this problem that we all seriously need to understand, and we hope we can help connect those dots for you. But the bioaccumulation, as these pollutants and plastics travel up through the food chain and eventually into our bodies as we consume the apex predators, is completely devastating to our health.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess what I'm trying to say, not that I am part of this community, but I guess it might be a good time to go vegan if you've been considering. Again, I am not a vegan, but yeah, this bioaccumulation problem. not only is it incredibly problematic, but it's also not going away anytime soon.
No, no,
As
it's
as
not.
Alexi pointed out, we don't even know exactly how large these Pacific. I keep wanting to call them Pacific. It's not just Pacific. The garbage patches are. There's a lot, and those are just the ones that ended up in the gyres. I mean, there's a lot of plastic in our oceans. This
Yes.
problem's not going away.
No, the
This
problem
problem
is
is not going
the
away.
problem is certainly not going away. Yeah, it can be very, very upsetting. And it was actually to just like again frame how like how new this is to society, not necessarily to the oil companies. We're gonna leave them out. They're in a class all of their own, per usual. It wasn't until 2004 that someone even had termed the coin microplastic. And we can thank Richard Thompson. I think he's the person who's credited with actually terming the word microplastic.
Holla, holla, Richard
Holla.
Thompson.
And that's what he used to refer to these teeny tiny plastic particles, which sounds so cute and innocuous. And like, if I can't see it, how is it bad for me? Well, I won't even get into that. Anyways, just to again picture how small we're talking, NOAA defines a microplastic as fragments of any plastic type that are less than 5 millimeters in size. That's like smaller than the white on my pinky nail. It's like ittiest of bittiest. So Thompson and his colleagues are credited for what I will call sounding the alarm because they also, at this point in time, made a call for more research on this emerging contaminant. And it was this call to action that brought about an incredible increase in scientific evidence that we now have regarding the effects of plastic debris on the ocean. So it's only been 20 years. Like literally at most of what we know about publicly, scientifically about correctly scientifically about plastic degradation is from the last 20 years. If that doesn't scare your pants off, I don't know what possibly could. But anywho, the growth
There's
of
hope still, though, guys.
there is hope. There is
Remember,
hope. There is hope. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on.
hold on.
Hold
Stick
on.
with us. We're in the rising action.
We are. We're not going to be like Rose and push you off of the very clearly large enough table to support both of us floating in the freezing, frigid
Can we talk
temperatures.
about how much of a narcissist she was for like 2 seconds?
I'll never let
Homegirl, there was
go.
definitely enough space on that door.
Pushes into ocean. All right, girl. She knew she had that diamond.
Fine.
She was like, I'm good. I don't need, I got my
She's like, I'm good. I'll
bag.
find.
I got my
I don't need your
bag, sis.
peasantry. I don't
And
need
then
your
she
peasant
did.
antics.
She became a grandma, so clearly she married somebody. Anyways, I
Yep.
digress.
Yep.
So so the growth in plastic production really began outpacing infrastructure for waste management early. Realistically, it started when it started. Like we weren't prepared to dispose of this thing that we had created, and arguably it took us some time to really realize the impact that it would have on such a scale, right? Like I don't think
Right.
people
Right.
saw
I
the
mean,
proliferation becoming what it is, but here we are.
well, probably not, but I mean, think about the timeline again. The first alarm about this went off in 1996, and then it was 2004 that they discovered what was, actual like the actual sort of effects of this patch of of the plastic in the oceans. I think it says a lot about our priorities. I guess governmentally speaking and politically speaking about the priorities because we only discovered this in 96, 2004, 8 years later, they actually figure out, which isn't not, I guess that is like relatively, it's not that much time, 8 years to discover what's actually happening. But now we're 20 years after this. And as you pointed out in the top of the episode, we actually don't really know how to get rid of this problem.
Yeah, we don't. And also not to burst that bubble, but while scientifically, I think we started publicly paying attention to plastics in the late 90s, oil and gas companies knew from
Oh,
pretty
sure.
much the jump
All internally
the
though. I
impact.
don't know if anything was really public
Probably not.
until that point. Yeah.
Probably
They
not.
kept all that stuff to themselves and
They did.
they probably paid a pretty penny to keep it internal as well.
They did. And while waste management still has not caught up, as we said earlier, arguably this is one of our two biggest hurdles to clear in order to get our plastic pollution under control. Circular economy, waste management. Those are like the two big things that we need, and it takes like government implementation to get there. It takes consumer pushing us to get there. But anyways, this is like what we need to get our plastic pollution under control. And a large amount of plastics are being mismanaged, which basically means that the proper waste management is missing them entirely. And waste management for plastic includes like three things basically: recycling, incinerating, which means burning it, or keeping it in a sealed landfill. You've got three options for disposal.
Does that not feel like we're so living in like, I don't know, ancient Mesopotamia with these options? I
Yeah,
mean, you would think that with science and industry advancements, we would have come up with some better ideas than this by now. These
you
are
would
just so
think.
tragic.
You would think.
These are so tragic.
You would think, especially because we are still producing it. We are
Ah,
still making more plastic. Anywho, one estimate just to like put into perspective what kind of what mismanagement looks like. Like, okay, so it doesn't get burned, it doesn't get recycled, it doesn't end up in a landfill. So like where does it go? Well, 24 million tons of it every year go into our aquatic ecosystems, including oceans.
24 million tons
Yeah,
end up in our aquatic ecosystems.
yeah,
What
alone.
percent is 24 million tons of plastic, annual plastic production or like waste compared to the total?
400 million tons of plastic waste every year.
Yeah, so if you do the math, 6% of it is ending up in our oceans.
Slay.
To think that that's only 6%, and that's 24 million
Yeah. And the
tons.
rest of it,
24 million elephants, people. I think an elephant's about a ton.
yeah, a ton-ish, maybe a car. I don't know. I don't know anything about cars. I don't even own one. I can't afford it.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't own one either. I am a passenger princess slash walkability princess
Yeah, you
slash
and
I'll
me
take
both.
the bus.
You and me both. And I'll just say, like, there are a lot of numbers out there about the amount of plastic that we've produced ever, and it comes up to like a very sickening amount of hundreds of millions of metric tons. But every year we've got at least 24 million going straight into our aquatic ecosystems. And
This is literally
this,
so devastating.
yeah, while some suggest that most mismanaged plastics now come from low to middle income countries, richer countries have been polluting the oceans for a much longer time and they haven't stopped. So whenever you see the finger pointing again from like, oh, well, they're the ones that are doing it now. Okay, well, you did it for the last 125 years. So,
Also, a lot of the times this argument is so baseless because guess who is doing all of the production out of the US because the US became too expensive, so they end up doing it in the third world countries? American companies, people. It's still Americans who are producing the trash. Just FYI.
amazing.
Just FYI.
And I think that Chelsea Rochman so succinctly summarizes what we're talking about today. Quote, though the story of plastic pollution, big and small, began decades ago in remote central ocean gyres, we now know that plastic debris is ubiquitous across all ocean basins, ecosystems, habitats, and food webs, including in seafood and sea salt. It's in everything. It is in everything. Now, we're not going to leave you with this like holy shit everything is done and dying and dead mentality, because who would we be if we did that? Not us.
Not
We would
us.
never doom you all. So we're going to talk about like at a local level, how we have seen and why grassroots here is so important for policies to be enacted. Like, for example, banning single-use products such as bags and straws, while they don't have the largest impact on reducing waste, I personally think they play a more important role in shifting our everyday practices away from single-use products.
I am so glad you brought this up because I'm sure you do too, we get caught up in conversations with people who maybe don't really understand the point of eliminating these types of products we're used to using every single day. They're like, oh, what's the point? Like, is one little straw really making that big of a difference? And the answer to that question is yes, but not maybe for what you think. It's not necessarily because we're eliminating straws that we're solving the plastic problem. No, what we're doing is it's a paradigm shift from what we were grown up taught to do and use to something else. Like you don't actually need to use that material for this, or you don't actually need that item at all. And here's us actually functioning just fine without those items. Just as a personal anecdote here I want to say it's nationwide in Italy, but at least in Florence, they have completely banned plastic bags. All grocery bags are now made from a completely biodegradable material, and they actually will charge you at the grocery store if you need one. So again, is that saving the plastic problem? Absolutely not. If you go into any grocery store in Italy, you'll still see most of the stuff is packaged in plastic. So we're not solving the plastic problem with that. What we are doing is now incentivizing you to use a reusable material. Well, I'm speaking in the collective as if I enacted these policies, but what they're doing now is they're not only incentivizing you by not charging you to bring your own bag. And if you do bring it, at least, or if you do require a grocery bag at the store, it's made in a completely biodegradable material. So you can put it in the organic waste and it'll decompose with all the organic waste that you sort. So like Lexi pointed out, it's not going to solve anything. It's just a paradigm shift. Now people are bringing more of their own reusable bags to the store and they're requiring less plastic on this front. And it just gets you thinking more like, oh, what else can I replace? What else? It kind of starts a nice chain reaction of thought. At least I think I would like to believe it does.
I completely agree. And like we have this rhetoric of like, oh, bringing your own bags to the grocery store isn't going to save the planet, and not using a straw like one time isn't going to save the planet. But truly, these kinds of small acts, whether we are realizing it or not, play probably the most important role in environmental advocacy because, like
Mhm.
we've said in the past, our consumer dollar is a way of protesting, it's a way of advocating. It is like the markets and then the governments respond to the way that we interact with these products. It's the role of environmental advocacy in spreading awareness that right now I think is more important than ever.
Is it not mind-boggling that people don't know about this? A lot of people now have access to know about these things, sure, whatever. I'm pointing the fingers at why is this not like required text in schools? Why are governments subsidizing plastic production and fossil fuel production still? Why are fossil fuel companies and plastic companies coining terms like carbon footprint to make you the one to feel responsible for this problem? Like, this is a big collaborative, collective effort on media, government, big industry to work together to keep a lot of people in the dark or to think it's maybe not that big of a deal or to think that, if it is a problem, it's on you to fix. Like, oh, thanks, man.
Yeah,
Spreading awareness about this and even I don't know, just doing the absolute most that we can to connect. Again, we keep saying to connect the dots, the intersectionality of an issue like this. This is not like a freak occurrence. This happened because it has been incentivized by the government. It has happened because fossil fuel companies have made
profited.
an absolute monopoly fortune off of this industry. It is because it is purposefully not discussed in the lens of responsibility, but rather individual cleanup. It's a culmination of reasons why we've found ourselves here.
And if I may take it one step further to just
You
really,
may
really work this in, really massage in this information. The
get a nice
environmental movement,
rub down.
good rub down. The environmental movement has skipped over plastics, like almost entirely. It is mind-boggling. And I'm not saying this in a like conspiracy theorist, like I think we skipped over it. No, like it largely was an afterthought that only now in the last decade or so is truly being confronted. We do not have a Clean Air Act equivalent for plastic pollution. Nothing like that
Does the Clean
exists.
Water Act not encompass plastic pollution? It doesn't.
No, the
She's
Clean
shaking her
Water
head.
Act, no. Like
Wow.
this is not necessarily part of it. And frankly, I think that if it is, it's maybe an afterthought. Again, it's like an afterthought.
I don't think that's any coincidence, though. I mean, we've talked about it in the History of Plastics episode. The fossil fuel industry has so much lobbying power to ensure that it's probably not mentioned
But
in this type of legislation.
yeah, and while I think that like two things can be true. We can be lied to and people actually not like, and by people I mean governments, like p governments can believe these lies and not know the true impact of this pollution. But there's also the
Not a
side,
chance.
I don't know. I want to believe that, and here's why, right? Here's why I'm saying this. I want to believe that people could be not necessarily willfully ignorant, but not willfully ignorant. Like they just literally did not know. And what makes me believe that truly is the fact that we don't even have plastics written into our history of the environmental movement. PBS, the EPA, Britannica, like three sources that should have plastics somewhere in their language about plastics do not. Even like I went on a freaking hunt to look for an environmental timeline that included plastics somewhere, anywhere. I was begging. I was like, can we get like
Yep.
some kind of a mention? And it just doesn't happen. And I refuse to
Well,
believe
think
that it is so deep-seated, like that this is such a huge conspiracy that it's infiltrated even these kinds of spaces. So while I do agree that there is a group who knew and intentionally buried it, which we will talk about, I don't think it's like the larger collective. I really think it's a small
no,
pocket that has like done
I
all of this
agree. I mean,
damage.
at the end of the day, I am not a conspiracy theorist, and I
No,
don't think that there were some like
you're not.
huge forces at play here to purposefully remove it or keep it out of mention in most of these or majority of these publications. I mean, thank goodness, shout out to us. Thank goodness we're doing this season on plastic so that there is some light shed and some well the web of all of these issues and to
Yeah.
show that they are very much they're all working together. They're all
No, and I
basically
think it's more like dominoes than it is anything else. Like
okay.
so earlier we talked about how Rachel Carson's Silent Spring was both like a time reference for us, but also to kind of give Captain Charles more similar kudos. Like he did kind of bring our attention, at least in the like oceanic
Right.
sense, to this like
Yeah.
full-blown problem that we were having. But if we're being real, the environmental awakening about plastic pollution really kicked off in the last 5 to 10 years. And like, why did it take us so long? That's what we're asking right now. Why did it take us so long to get here? Well, for more than 40 years, we have been sorting our trash, believing that most plastic could be recycled because oil and gas companies spent millions of dollars advertising this as truth. Millions of dollars, right? That's pennies. That's pennies to them. If you want to be disturbed, go look at how much these companies make on a year-to-year basis. $1 million to them is like $10 to us. Like it's a little
If you're
inconvenience, but
into
it's not that bad.
masochism, go
Literally.
check that out.
But the
Um,
reality
okay, this,
is,
yeah,
the
go
reality
on.
is plastic produced, most plastic produced cannot be or will not be recycled because in the last
Say it
40
louder.
years,
Say it
here we
louder
go.
for the
For the
people
last
in the
40
back.
years, less than 10% of plastic has ever been recycled.
Wait, are you serious?
Has ever been recycled. Less than 10%. And this comes from a joint
Guys,
investigation by NPR and Frontline. So if you'd like to read more about that, we
yep.
have it linked. But this is the like this is the domino. This is what set us on this trajectory. Like very intentional, very
Yes.
careful plotting and scheming and planning. So while I really want to believe ignorance for a lot of people who like signed off on this shit to become as bad as it was, you're so right. Like there are people behind this. It's just it's really snowballed and um
Well,
yeah.
it goes back to my spiel I had a few minutes ago where this is the whole recycling rhetoric is 100% an example of fossil fuel companies, plastic companies coming up with something that makes you feel like you have to take the action and you have to take the responsibility. Just put it in the recycle bin. When in reality, our recycling system was never going to work. It was never going to be all that they chalked it up to be. And like you
No.
said, I like we're both agreeing on. I think that that was 100% orchestrated to make not in like a conspiracy theorist way, but just in a way to like kind of deviate us from wanting to invest in other materials out other than plastic.
Yeah. I
Because
think
that way you
I think you're
recycle it
right.
and you feel like you know you've done your environmental martyr duties. Like you feel like, okay, I recycled that, so it's, I'm doing my part. I'm closing the loop, baby.
Yeah. I really wish. And I think like to leave us on a more positive note, because I am going to let you all go here very soon. I think this is throughout this episode, we have highlighted how Rachel Carsons are not few and far between. Like we've got Moore, we've got Thompson, we've got Carson. We have these people who get the credit for their work and contributing to raising the alarm on these things. But we also have the students who are doing research. Like so many student articles on in research I came across as I was putting together this episode. And the ethos behind all of this is taking responsibility for environmental stewardship. And it's us like hello, we're here, that's wonderful, like if you're listening then like go tell a friend. This is the kind of stuff that is going to get us from where we are right now to seeing a world in which plastic bioaccumulation maybe isn't gone, but it's something that we can take more control over because right now these things are just happening to us. Like we are very much not in the driver's seat of this situation. We can be.
I recently heard a statistic in the book that we're actually reading for book club. If you guys haven't been filled in on that yet, we are reading a book for book club. It is called What If We Get It Right by Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson. Regardless, in that book, there was a statistic that said, this is very recent, by the way, I believe the book was published in 2024, so it's a relatively recent statistic. However, I think it's somewhere around 60% of people, I think it was particularly in this generation, again, don't quote me, it's something around this, do not talk about the environment amongst in their daily like they don't talk about it. It's not a subject that comes up, but like Lexi said, it is really meaningful and impactful that you guys even listen to this and
Yeah.
that maybe you can even tell a friend because majority of people are actually not discussing these things, particularly not discussing how the intersectionality of these problems. So, if anything, I hope that these obviously we need to face the reality. We need the reality check. We need to hear these things like this. We need to hear episodes like this that they feel a little scary. They feel a little bit they feel heavy. Sometimes it feels like you can't even do anything about it, right? But
Yeah.
like that is just we are optimists at the end. That is so not the case. Talk about it. Listen to this stuff. Educate yourself. We have a lot of resources. You have cool people like Lexi and myself here trying to convey these messages. It is really important, and it all starts with awareness.
I couldn't agree more. It starts with us making conscious consumer choices. And you all are going to be so sick and freaking tired of us saying that for the rest of this podcast because that theme is never, ever, 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 ever going to go away. Being a conscious consumer is probably one of the most impactful things you can do, not only for environmentalism, but also for like being a humanitarian more broadly, like human rights will benefit if you are a conscious consumer. Your pocketbook will appreciate it if you're a conscious consumer. Like all of this has a very like being a conscious consumer has a direct impact on so many different aspects of not only your own life, but our collective lives because we don't have a planet B. And as much as Elon Musk and whoever else thinks that we're gonna like fucking colonize Mars, like maybe, but it's certainly not gonna be in this generation, and it's certainly not gonna be the same. Like we still need what we have here. We cannot
No
live
offense.
without this planet.
No offense, but literally, who would want to live on Mars, that desolate planet with a bunch of tech billionaires? Like, that does not sound fun to me. Our planet is so beautiful, so beautiful. Let's just do what we can to stay right here. Because
Yeah,
I know
let's just
I
give it a
would
break.
rather be buried by a tsunami than stuck on Mars with these tech jerk billionaires. I'll pass. I will pass that dusty ass spaceship they're gonna shove us in talking about this garbage. I would really rather not.
Listen, zero gravity is not glamorous. Also, if I can be so bold, try peeing
Imagine the
in zero
havoc this would
gravity.
have on your hair.
I'd look pretty crazy. I'd be in a slick back bun every single day. But anyways, the last thing that I'm gonna leave you with is basically that life finds a way. Whether it's us or it's other microorganisms, like I know we have said that there is no like biodegrading of plastics. However, we are finding that there are emerging species capable of eating plastics more or less. They're not at a point where they can make a significant difference at this point, but we really do want to emphasize here that the need for continued research and policy action, like that is how life will find a way. Like we need to give ourselves the breathing room through our actions and what we advocate for politically so that life can basically continue. One last quote from Chelsea Rochman. We need a toolbox of solutions that includes plastic reduction, the building of a circular economy, improved waste management systems, innovation that results in new materials and technologies for prevention, as well as cleanup, outreach, and education. We also need everyone working together, including the plastic industry, waste managers, the public, scientists, and all levels of government from all over the world. So, folks, it takes all of us, and you being here is part of solving this problem.
Thank you.
Seriously, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you to Lexi for that amazing episode. I feel like I learned something. And thank you to you guys for listening, because as she pointed out, you're a part of the solution. Just a little preview of our next episode. We will be transitioning to plastics and human health specifically, from convenience to concern, plastics in the food chain and ecosystems. I would like to encourage all of you guys to also please engage with our Instagram account. We'll be posting questions and we'll be releasing these episodes also on YouTube. So please head over there as well. Our YouTube channel is Hotel Earth 360. And check out our website, hotelearth360.com. As well as I kind of previewed before, our newly installed book club. We will be reading a new book every month or every other month depending on how the length of the book. But it would be awesome if you guys could follow along with us and learn with us as we cover topics that will range between fiction and nonfiction, but we'll always tie it back to what we talk about here, um, which is climate conversations and the intersectionality that encompasses that. Of course, also sign up for our newsletter, which you can do on our website. It's a new monthly read that will come to your inbox every month, where it'll be, a little Lexi and Ari show. It'll be sort of news and announcements within our space, but also important climate news that will be that we think you guys should read. And finally, if you guys can go to the support us page of our website and consider becoming a patron. We work super, super hard on these episodes, and it would mean the world to us if you were able to support us in that way, if you could. So thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you in our next episode. Until next time.
Bye.